A double brood of cicadas has begun to emerge and invade towns on the East Coast, and that begins.
See that beautiful cicada there hatching out of his shell right now, and you can hear him in the distance too.
More than 1 trillion of the loud insects will swarm parts of the U.S. later this month. 2 different cicada broods.
Every 13 to 17 years. This summer, though, an unusual double dose is going to hit it.
Witness the most alarming signs pointing towards the Rapture's arrival as they unfold in the United States. From mysterious phenomena to biblical prophecies coming to life, these events have sent shockwaves across the globe. Tune in to explore the dark omens that have left the world on edge. Picture this: millions of cicadas, not pests, but divine creations, are erupting from the earth. This isn't a horror movie, it's reality. After an incredible 221-year slumber, these fascinating creatures are awakening together to offer a unique song of praise. These aren't the infamous locusts of the Bible, but their emergence reminds us of both creation's wonders and the prophetic scriptures about plagues and trumpets signaling the end times. The answer to this mystery is hidden within the scripture. The typologies riddled throughout the Bible, in addition to events prophesied by the major and minor prophets, may hold the answer. God will reveal the answer of that day to those who diligently seek Him. In Illinois and Indiana, a chorus thousands of years in the making will soon fill the air. These aren't the usual annual cicadas. These are periodical cicadas that spend 13 or 17 years underground before surfacing in a symphony of sound and movement. Over 190 varieties exist in North America, but only in the US do we experience this periodical marvel, this powerful testament to the cycles of life and death. What does it signify when the earth breaks open and the atmosphere vibrates with the calls of billions of cicadas? Is this simply an oddity of nature, or a parable for our times? A reminder of Matthew 24:7, warning of upheaval and unrest. While not the locusts of Revelation, this biblical scale cicada emergence prompts reflection on our world and the signs of a higher power at work. This awe-inspiring and unnerving event challenges our place in creation. Scientists urge us to protect these harmless creatures, which nourish the trees they were born under, fulfilling a cycle older than our oldest texts. They symbolize life's resilience, nature's renewal. As cicadas blanket the land in a spectacle unseen by anyone alive, we're reminded of nature's beauty and power, its complexity and mystery mirroring the Bible's teachings. We stand at a historical crossroads, witnessing events that make us look up from our routines and wonder, is this prophecy unfolding, or are we merely observing creation's marvels? It's kinda sad how people are sometimes very narrow-minded in their comments. But as a dedicated follower of Jesus Christ, I will say He clearly told us we would know the season of the events laid out in Revelation. So even though the day and hour are up to the Father, His people are in tuned to what's happening. Exactly no one knows the day. Keep living for the Lord and be obedient to everything He has commanded us to do. Alongside 2024, air vibrates with mysterious trumpet sounds as cicadas emerge in vast numbers. This isn't just a rare natural event. It's a phenomenon that challenges our understanding, inspiring awe, fear, and deep curiosity. Imagine the sudden harmony of unexplained trumpets filling the air, resonant and seemingly divine. Previously only sporadic events. The mysterious trumpet sounds have intensified in 2024, sparking both wonder and concern. They echo biblical prophecies of 7 trumpets signaling apocalyptic events, prompting questions about their divine origin. Interpretations range from scientific to spiritual, but the impact is undeniable, fueling widespread discussion and debate. Simultaneously, as if orchestrated, the land awakens with the emergence of cicadas, specifically 2 broods unseen together since the early 1800s. 17 states witness this spectacle that blurs the lines between science and the miraculous. Illinois and Indiana, in particular, find themselves at the epicenter of this peculiar convergence, hosting both 13-year and 17-year broods in a simultaneous explosion of life that defies easy explanation. With over 190 varieties in North America alone, the sheer number and precise timing of the cicadas speak to a natural world filled with mystery and wonder. America's reaction has been as diverse as it is intense. Scientists, scholars, theologians, and lay people alike all seek to understand the meaning of these events. Social media buzzes with theories and testimonials. News outlets report with a mix of fascination and unease. And communities in affected states brace for the impact of this dual phenomenon. The Cicada's song, reaching 105 dB, becomes the soundtrack of an extraordinary summer, a reminder of nature's power and capacity to amaze. Beyond the immediate sensory impact lies a deeper reflection. These events compel us to look beyond the ordinary, to contemplate the mysteries at the heart of our existence. The cicadas, with their lengthy subterranean life cycle, emerge as symbols of rebirth and renewal. The trumpets, with their ethereal beauty and haunting mystery, remind us of the profound and often inexplicable nature of our world. As we witness these extraordinary events, we recall the words of Job 12:7-10, reminding us that even animals, birds, earth, and sea creatures know that God's hand is at work. In the cicada's song and the trumpet's call, we hear echoes of creation's ongoing story, inviting us to listen, reflect, and marvel at the wonders of a world that remains full of mystery and majesty. In a year already filled with remarkable events, a new chapter unfolds, reminiscent of ancient plagues that once toppled empires. But what if these signs and wonders aren't just about the end of the world? What if they're also connected to a rebirth, a return? Could the emergence of the cicadas and the mysterious trumpet sounds be linked to an even bigger event foretold in prophecy? When you think of Rapture, what comes to mind? Apocalyptic scenes of being taken away at the last trumpet of God to come out and be with Him forever. But the rapture we're discussing today precedes that day. It's our call today, to come out and follow Him. Yeshua is coming back and He brings with Him the believers. Holy temple from heaven, and Jesus will rule the temple 1,000 years. Some opinion is that if the Jews built a new temple, it would be destroyed like the other two temples. However, for Orthodox Jews, it represents more than just a physical edifice. It symbolizes holiness and serves as a center for worship. Since 1987, the temple movement has been actively preparing for the Third Temple's construction. Despite the prevailing secular climate, Orthodox Jews remain steadfast in their commitment to this cause. They've reinstated the Sanhedrin, a religious council overseeing the temple's affairs, with the aim of reconstructing it according to religious precepts. For Orthodox Jews, rebuilding the temple is pivotal for the betterment of the world, as they believe that its reconstruction is intrinsically linked to global improvement. Moreover, the return of Israel to its promised land and the rebuilding of the Third Temple align with biblical prophecies, as foretold by prophets like Ezekiel and Isaiah, emphasizing God's pledge to restore His people. Then the nations will know that I, the Lord, make Israel holy when my sanctuary is among them forever. God's plan always included the return of the Jewish people to their land on His terms. After centuries of dispersion across the globe, this return fulfills prophecies of gathering from all corners of the earth. I will say to the north, give them up, and to the south, do not hold them back. Bring my sons from afar and my daughters from the ends of the earth. You might wonder about the necessity of building the Third Temple when Yeshua ministers in the true tabernacle in heaven. However, the Holy Temple is more than just a physical structure. It serves as a dwelling place for the divine presence of God. Let them construct a sanctuary for me, that I may dwell among them. The prophet Ezekiel bore witness to the departure of this divine presence from the temple, but also foresaw the rebuilding of an eternal dwelling place of God in Jerusalem. This is the place of my throne, and the place for the soles of my feet. This is where I will live among the Israelites forever. Rambam, a medieval Jewish philosopher, underscored the eternal significance of the temple. According to this perspective, the Third Temple isn't merely a historical reconstruction, but a symbol of God's eternal presence among His people. During the reconstruction of the Third Temple, an ancient temple was unearthed beneath the Temple Mount. In 1927, an earthquake damaged the Al-Aqsa Mosque, prompting investigations by archaeologist Robert Hamilton and Muslim clerics, revealing secrets concealed beneath the collapsed mosque. Years later, Israeli archaeologists Dr. Gabi Barai and Zaki Devira revisited these discoveries, sifting through tons of earth from the Temple Mount and uncovering surprising artifacts. These findings, such as a Jewish mikveh dating back to the Second Temple era and a Byzantine mosaic beneath the mosque, revolutionized the understanding of Jerusalem's history. These discoveries suggest a more diverse history at the Temple Mount, potentially including structures from the Byzantine era, such as churches. Furthermore, the arrival of red heifers from a Texas ranch has sparked significant interest among believers in the prophecy of the Third Temple's construction in Jerusalem. This event is viewed as a fulfillment of prophecy. However, there are other opinions that God did not tell them to build this temple, nor did they ask for it. Christ has fulfilled the Old Testament. Christ has declared your body a temple. The blood of Christ is what saves. There is no need for cow's blood or sacrifice anymore. Christ is the ultimate sacrifice. Going back to sacrifice cows would offend God. Why can't they understand? We are saved by the blood of Christ, by the grace of God. What do you think about sacrificing these cows? Please leave your opinion below in the comments section. These young heifers, less than a year old, hold immense significance in Jewish law. If they remain entirely red and free from blemishes, they can be used to produce ashes, which are essential for purifying those who have come into contact with a corpse, particularly for the priests who will serve in the future temple. Upon their arrival, these special heifers underwent a 7-day quarantine in Haifa, adhering to Israeli Veterinary Authority regulations. Subsequently, they will be relocated to 2 sites in Israel, one of which will be open to the public. They will be cared for until they reach 3 years old, at which point they can be sacrificed in accordance with Jewish law and their ashes produced. Bona Israel, an organization comprising both Jews and Christians, played a pivotal role in bringing these heifers to Israel. Byron Stinson, a Texas rancher and advisor for the organization, raised these cattle. Their arrival at Ben Gurion Airport was marked by a welcoming ceremony attended by officials from the Temple Institute and other dignitaries. The red heifer holds profound significance in the Bible, as its ashes were used for purifying the Israelites from impurity, as detailed in Numbers 19. These ashes were crucial for purification rituals in the temple. Therefore, the appearance of a red heifer today is viewed as a sign of the Third Temple's construction and the return of Christ. Traditionally, there have been 9 red heifers sacrificed since the time of Moses, but none since the destruction of the Second Temple. Rabbi Meir taught that the Messiah himself would sacrifice the 10th red heifer. The arrival of these 5 flawless red heifers from Texas to Israel on September 15, 2022, is perceived by many as a fulfillment of prophecy and a significant step towards the construction of a new temple. The criteria for a red heifer are stringent, as outlined in Mosaic law. It must be without defect or blemish, and have never borne a yoke. Numbers chapter 19:2. The process of sacrificing a red heifer involves unique rituals, including using a female animal, sacrificing it outside the camp, and ensuring the animal's specific color. This entire process serves as a foreshadowing of Christ's sacrifice. Jesus, like the red heifer, was without blemish. Similar to the red heifer's sacrifice outside the camp, Jesus was crucified outside Jerusalem. Just as the red heifer's ashes purified from the contamination of death, Jesus' sacrifice cleanses from the penalty and corruption of sin and death. Then in another development, the construction efforts reached a new milestone with the ceremony for the Third Temple taking place recently. An ancient water ceremony was conducted at an old temple in Jerusalem, drawing a large crowd. The ceremony commenced at Sha'ar HaShuvot in the city's old quarter, led by priests and musicians, with an enthusiastic crowd following them through historic routes to Shiloh, also known as Siloam Springs, a significant site during the temple's era. During the procession, chants and dances filled the air, accompanied by the sound of silver trumpets at each stop, while esteemed rabbis oversaw the proceedings. At Shiloh, water was collected in a golden jug before the procession returned to the mountain summit. Following ancient temple customs, a model altar with utensils and leafy branches was set up. The ceremony concluded with blessings and a special event known as Hakel, which occurs once every 7 years. Although not explicitly required by the Torah, the water libation is deeply rooted in Moses' oral teachings and is observed with great joy. The original temple ritual spanned 15 hours, continuing late into the night until regular temple services resumed. Sukkot celebrations attract participants from around the world, transforming into a global day of worship. During the final 6 days of Sukkot, the water libation ritual coincided with the morning wine-pouring service. Priests would fetch spring water from the temple and journey to the spring at the base of Mount Moriah. Within the temple's inner courtyard, 2 priests would pour wine and water into designated holes on the stone altar, upholding a tradition of significant historical and religious importance. Following these ceremonies, a marriage recently took place on the Temple Mount. Jeremiah 33:11 prophesies a time of joy and gladness, symbolizing the future Messiah's arrival and the construction of the Third Temple. This prophecy has led to a trend in Israel, where Jewish individuals visit the revered Temple Mount, viewing it as a harbinger of the Messiah's coming. Couples like Uriah Kantman and Coral Dishi Dean, from Rosh Hayyin and Telmon, respectively, are increasingly choosing the Temple Mount for their engagements. They combine the traditional Jewish marriage elements of kiddushin and nisuin, emphasizing humanity's creation in God's image and the establishment of an everlasting union. This significant event on the Temple Mount aligns with Jeremiah's prophecy, often recited at weddings, predicting a time of joy and thanksgiving in the land. The Temple Mount features historical gates for bridegrooms and mourners, known as the Gate of Mercy. As more Jewish couples opt for engagements on the Temple Mount, they see it as the realization of ancient prophecies, such as Zechariah 8:20-22, which envisions people from various cities flocking to Jerusalem to pray to the Lord. As we ponder these signs and wonders, and the potential for a biblical rapture, we're reminded that the concept of rapture itself holds deeper meaning. It's not just about an apocalyptic event, but a call to separate ourselves from the world and follow God. This is the true rapture we're called to experience today. The word itself actually has a different meaning, and so we're actually going more into the real meaning of rapture here. So we're again talking about the calling of God for holiness from his followers, from his believers, right? Calling. So it's God calling, and the initiative is on us to follow him, to leave everything behind and follow him. And we'll go over some scriptures, and we'll talk about them. And you can read the first one from Romans 12:2. Romans 12:2. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is good and acceptable and perfect will of God. So, here we have the first hint that the will of God is in opposition to this world, to what they call in German the Zeitgeist. The spirit of this world is in entities with opposition to God. Yeah, entity and opposition. So here again, we have a hint. If we want to do the will of God, we have to separate ourselves in holiness from the spirit of this world to conform our minds, right? But please, if you can, if we'll go to the first example of this calling, at least in the Old Testament. And if you can read in Hebrews 11:8-10, and we'll see how this calling is defined by God himself when he called Abraham. By faith, Abram obeyed when he was called to go out to the place which he would receive as an inheritance. And he went out, not knowing where he was going. By faith, he dwelt in the land of promise as in a foreign country, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. For he waited for the city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. So Abram heard by faith and went out, and we can read about it, of course. The backdrop is Genesis 12:1. You can just read Genesis 12:1. So we'll see the background of Hebrews. Genesis 12:1. Now, the Lord had said to Abram, "Get out of your country, from your family, and from your father's house, to a land that I will show you." You know what this reminds me of in Passover? Isn't that we say this? My father was a Syrian, ready to perish. He was a Syrian ready to perish. And even just thinking of how disconnected Assyria is, like the enemy of God, And it's like he brings that narrative back to this moment. But what you read in Genesis 12, this is a concentrated example of the calling of God, a separation of everything that we know. We have to deny ourselves, and Abraham is called to deny what? To leave what? To forsake what? His home, his country, his family, and go to the land that, what does it say in the end of the verse? To a land that I will show you. So he's living without a map, without a blueprint, without GPS. Okay, you want me to go there? I'll go there. No, to the land that I will show you. But first, what do you have to do? You have to step out. Wow, you have to leave. God calls you. You have to go. Wait, God, where do you want me to go? Hey, I just called you out. Go out. It's the same thing with the manna. You remember the manna from heaven that he gave Israel? Did they give them everything they needed for 40 years? Did they give them in one day or what? Every day, right? Every morning, they had to wake up in faith, and he told them, don't take for the next day. Don't take for the next day. Every day, taking in faith, and I'll give you the next day. I'll give you fresh. So Abram, again, the calling is to leave everything to the land that I will show you. After you leave, I will show you day by day if you walk in faith. But this is the calling of God, to leave everything. And if you jump to the New Testament, if it's what we're saying. It's the same calling of God to leave everything behind. And we have an example in Mark. Can you read Mark 1:16, 17? We will hear of two brothers. And as Yeshua walked by the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and Andrew, his brother, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. Then Yeshua said to them, follow me, and I'll make you become fishers of men. Then they immediately left their nets and followed him. Exactly. So they left everything they had invested in this world. All the nets, yes, and even further. It wasn't just them. And when he had gone a little further from there, he saw James, the son of Zebedee, and John, his brother, who were also mending their nets. And immediately he called them, and they left their father, Zebedee, in the boat. Their father, like Abram, your father's house. So leave whatever nets, whatever security, whatever investment you have in this world. If God is calling you, he has something better for you. Of course, the Messiah. What's better than going after the Messiah? But leave everything you've got invested. Yeah, and when I think about it, it reminds me of how Abraham knew the struggle, and he knew the temptation to go back. And why did he send his servant to get Rebekah, to get Isaac's bride? He said, don't send my son. Don't let him go there. Just send my servant. He sent his servant to go, bring Rebekah back in faith. He knew that God would be faithful and provide. He knew that if he would go back, he would be tempted. And you know what we read in Hebrews? If you go back to Hebrews 11, I think it's verse 9. Even when he got to the promised land. Hebrews 11. If you read verse 9, what does it say? Yeah, starting verse 8. By faith, Abram obeyed when he was called to go out of the place which he would receive as an inheritance. And he went out, not knowing where he was going. By faith, he dwelt in the land of promises, in a foreign country. This is incredible. Even though he got to the promised land, it's as if he never got there, really. Even in the promised land, he lived like a foreigner. Why? Why? It says in the next verse. Why? He said to be intense. Yeah, for he waited for the city which has foundations, whose builder and maker is God. Exactly. He knew the calling of God wasn't over. It's not over. It's for the rest of your life. You're never there. You're never there. And because the calling is, it's not it's not a single event. No. Okay, I'll go this minute. and that's it. You go for the rest. And even when he got to the promised land, it says he lived there like a foreigner, because he waited for a better city than Jerusalem that would come from heaven. And not even just the city of Jerusalem to be built, like in David's time. We're talking about he waited for God's foundation. And now, in Hebrews chapter 13, if you can read verses 13 and 14. Look, this calling, the writer of Hebrews is saying, this calling is upon our life also. Let us also therefore, let us go forth to him outside the camp, bearing his reproach. For here, we have no continuing city, but we seek the one to come. Sadly, for a long time among Hebrew-speaking Jews, Yeshua was known as Yeshu, which is an acronym for a curse. Yimach Shemo Vezikro meaning, may its name and everything known about it be wiped out. The Jews suffered so much and were persecuted for the name of Yeshua that his name became a stumbling block, and he is now often considered one of the enemies of the Jewish people. This word, Yeshu, is made up of 3 Hebrew letters, Y-I-S-U, Y-S-S-I-H-V, but it is missing the last letter of his name, the A sound. This last letter is Ayin, which, interestingly enough, means eye. It seems that without Ayin, they cannot see, but when Ayin is added, the eyes of the blind will be opened to see their Lord. People call him Yeshu instead of Yeshua in Israel, but there are some scholars who call him Yeshua. In Israel, he was often considered a pagan, the leader of a group called Christians, or by any other name. But Jesus was not a Christian. He was not a Christ follower. He was the Christ, the Jewish Messiah. Jesus was not a Christian. Mary was not a Catholic, and John was not a Baptist. They were all Jews. Christ is the Greek word for Messiah, so Jesus Christ actually means Yeshua, the Messiah. I remember once taking a class on the New Testament at a university in Israel, taught by a non-believer. So she simply saw the Bible as an important book that shaped the Western civilization only. When the students asked what Christ meant, was that his last name? The professor explained that it was the Greek word for Messiah. To my delight, she wrote on the board, in Hebrew, to a classroom full of Israeli students, Jesus equals Yeshua equals Christ equals Messiah. The people of Israel here did not understand this clearly, but gradually the light came out and shone as more and more people understood that Jesus Christ was not a foreign figure of a foreign religion, but Yeshua, salvation, the Jewish Messiah from Nazareth in Israel, who was prophesied in the Jewish Bible. She will give birth to a son. You shall name him Yeshua, for he will save his people from their sins. Matthew 1:21. So, now the question. Now that we know his real name in Hebrew is Yeshua, should we still call him Jesus? It is true that his mother and friends then called him Yeshua and not Jesus. But if up until now you had only known him as Jesus, would he have been bothered by that? Is it wrong to call him Jesus? Some will strain their necks to argue that we should call him Yeshua and not Jesus, or Jesus, because this is very important. But I think that Yeshua's coming is also the time when God brings salvation to the Gentiles. I believe that it was no coincidence that his name became so popular in the international language of that time, Greek, that it could go far and spread widely to every country in the world until nowadays. In other words, whether you call him Jesus or Jesus, he doesn't mind. He is still your Savior, and even if you do not pronounce his name correctly in Hebrew, your heart still knows clearly who it is that you are calling upon. God is opening the way for all the peoples of the earth to come to him. If you are used to calling him Jesus, there is no need to change to Yeshua, because it is not really necessary. He knows his sheep, and his sheep recognize his voice. The name of God has spread throughout the nations in many different versions, but now, back in the place where he was born, Israel, modern-day Israel, people are only just beginning to discovered the truth that Yeshua was their Jewish Messiah. Yeshua will be recognized again by his brothers. just as Joseph's brothers could not recognize him in Egyptian clothes and because he spoke in a strange tongue when they came to ask for help. So Yeshua was among the Gentiles, bringing salvation, and now seems obscured by foreign terms and cultures. It was difficult for his Jewish brothers and sisters to recognize him as one of their own. Remember what happened to Joseph and his brothers in Genesis 45:1-5. Joseph told his brothers the truth. He cried so loudly that the Egyptians and Pharaoh's royal family heard. Joseph said to his brothers, "I am Joseph. Is my father still alive?" But before him, the brothers were all scared and speechless. Joseph said, "Please, come near to me." They came closer. He said, "I am Joseph, the younger brother whom you sold to Egypt. But now, don't be sad, and don't blame yourself for selling me here. It was to preserve life that God sent me here before you." Joseph was a foreshadowing of the Messiah, sold for 20 pieces of silver, while Yeshua was betrayed for 30 pieces of silver, suffering at the hands of his brothers and dying in their place, but still brings salvation to both his family and many other surrounding people. We know that at some point this revelation will also come to the Jewish people, as God promised in Zechariah 12:10. "I will pour out the spirit of grace and supplication on the house of David and on the inhabitants of Jerusalem. They will look upon me, whom they have pierced, and they will mourn for him as one mourns for an only child, and will mourn for him as one mourns for a firstborn." Or as in Zechariah 13:6, if anyone asks, "What are the wounds between your arms?" he will answer, "They are the wounds I received in my friend's house." This has not happened yet, but when it does, there will be many people who cry with both fear, "What have we done?" and joy, just as happened to Joseph and his disciples. My brothers, they will embrace their Jewish brother Yeshua, the promised Messiah. Then the universal joy of reconciliation and family reunion will be shared by both Jews and Gentiles, for God has made use of all the years in which he was rejected by his own people for the benefit and salvation of his people, salvation of the whole world.